5 centuries ago, in taverns and public houses across Europe, the masses would gather for discussion and debate over the latest ideas sweeping the land. From one such meeting place, a small Cambridge inn called the White Horse, the Reformation came to the English-speaking world. Carrying on the tradition of the early reformers, welcome to the White Horse Inn.
Welcome back to the White Horse Inn. We are taking a little bit of a break from the Romans Revolution to talk about something that really is actually quite relevant to that series, namely the confrontation between Islam and Christianity at the theological level. While everyone else is talking about dropping bombs and wars on terror, very important subjects for us to discuss and debate as citizens, we're focusing on the theological crisis, the spiritual crisis, the interface between Muhammad as a false prophet and Jesus Christ as the prophet, priest, and king. Everything that we're talking about in the book of Romans, everything that we emphasize on the White Horse Inn, knowing what you believe and why you believe it, is pointed up again and again in our discussions of the crisis, really, in which Christian churches and Western cultures find themselves in the face of Islam. Romans and the message that it offers us is exactly what we need most to re-energize, reinvigorate, and bring maturity to the church in the face of this incredible crisis. Speaking for myself, I thought I knew just a little bit about Islam until I met up with our guest, Sam Solomon. Sam Solomon is an expert in Sharia law. That's Islamic jurisprudence. He spent 15 years studying Sharia law to become an Islamic jurist. Upon his conversion, he was given 48 hours to leave the country, and since then he has been in London, where he is a consultant with Parliament, as he has also been with our United States Congress. But more than that, he is a witness to Christ in the Muslim world, and we are greatly privileged to have him on our program. After you hear this interview, I think you'll agree with me that there really is a desperate need for Christians today to know what they believe and why they believe it. It's not going to be wars on terror, and it's not going to be missiles. It's going to be the Word of God that is able to stand up against the gates of hell. We are very privileged to have Mr. Sam Solomon with us, someone who is described by Baroness Cox, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Lords, as the leading scholar of Islam and Christianity, knows more about both of them than most people in Britain. So it's a real pleasure to have you with us.
Delighted to be with you.
First of all, Sam, what is Islam? We hear on the news that Islam is a religion of peace. They're just these sort of isolated extremists over here, but Islam as a religion is a religion of peace.
Well, Islam, by definition, is, as far as the Quran is concerned, Surah 49, verse 14, Surah Al-Hujurat says, قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله. In the English, what it reads is that the desert Arabs said, they went to say to Muhammad, we are now believers, we have become believers. And Allah commanded Muhammad to say to them, that faith has not entered your hearts. You have surrendered, you have submitted. So Islam, by that definition, means surrender and submission. For them to be called believers, they must practice and obey Allah and His Apostle. So the definition that people give to us on the media is incompatible with the Quranic definition. Islam does not mean peace.
What is Islam about then?
Islam sees the world in two parts. It sees the people either as Muslims or non-Muslims. And the non-Muslims are a target for Islam at all times. Because Muhammad came and said, "Umirt an uqatil an-nas," I have been sent to fight, to kill people, to slay them, until such time they recite the Islamic creed. And when they have recited the Islamic creed, then they are safe. Their property and their lives are guaranteed to them. If not, then they would face the might of the sword.
So conversion for Islam is not something that is presented to people as a decision that they must make, but is the law of their being. They simply must convert, even at the point of a sword, if necessary.
That is how Islam started, and that is how it continued. Take, for instance, Mike, Islam started out in Saudi Arabia in the 7th century. How did it arrive to Egypt, Libya, North Africa, Persia, Syria, all the surrounding regions and beyond? Did they send very religious, mild, loving people who went out and said, please accept Islam, this is the doctrines, this is what it is? No. There were hordes of assassins called mujahideen. These mujahideen were no less than they were all for invasion. And the Quran says, and it gives them the injunction to conquer the unknown or the un-Islamic world there and to turn it into an Islamic world. That is what Islam is about. It sees the world as an apostate world, and it wants to bring the rule of Allah and submit, and people must submit. It isn't a personal faith. Personal faith would follow as long as they submit to the hegemony of Islam and its political and theological supremacy. That's what all it is looking for.
So is Islam a religion?
Islam, by definition, is not a religion in the Western sense of the word. Islam is neither a faith. Islam is a whole-encompassing system. Islam is a socio-political, socio-religious, socio-economical, educational, judiciary, legislative, militaristic system, cloaked and garbed in religious terminology. So in the Western sense, it isn't a religion. It is a whole system. You cannot separate one part of life from another. And Islam, as far as Islam is concerned, in Surah 3, verse 19, it says, Inna ad-dina 'inda Allah al-Islam. The religion before Allah is Islam. Allah knows no other religion. In Surah 3, verse 85 says, وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Whosoever desires, just desires any other religion, any other ideology, will not be received of him here, and in the life after, he will be doomed.
One of the things that we hear very often these days, of course, is that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam represent the religions of the book and the Abrahamic faiths. We are all children of Abraham. And we even hear sometimes imams, Islamic leaders tell us that this is how they see things as well. They see Christians and even Jews as brothers and sisters in one common Abrahamic faith. Is this consistent with Quranic teaching?
No, Mike. I wish that would be true, but it isn't. According to Surah 3, verse 67, it says, وَمَا كَانَ إِبْرَاهِيمًا يَهُودِيًا وَلَا نَصْرَانِيًا وَلَكِنْ كَانَ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian, but he bowed his will to Allah in Islam. Abraham was a Muslim according to Islam. In fact, Islam believes that every single human being is a Muslim. Every single prophet from Adam to Jesus to Muhammad to all the people in the world, they are Muslims. They have chose to walk away from Islam. Allah does not create anybody but Muslims. As far as the Jews and the Christians are concerned, Islam is very clear. Its position, it calls them. Now this is 20% of the world, looking at 80% of the world. Whether they are Jews, Christians, Buddhists, or anybody else for that, Islam says that they are all profane. And that word occurs in Surah 9, verse 28. إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ نَجِسٌ فَلَا يُقَرِّبُونَ مَسْجِدَ الْحَرَامِ بَعْدَ عَامِهِمْ هَذَا. The pagans, the unbelievers, are profane, says the Quran. And that profanity is practiced every day, that view. In the sense that if a Muslim has to shake hands with a non-Muslim just before going to prayer, and he would have done his ablution, he has to repeat it because now he is no longer clean.